Welcome to the NBAV podcast.
Welcome back to NBA Avenue podcast, where there's a couple of things that I want to talk about. One of them is Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon has just had a super strange, unique NBA career. So that's one topic I want to hit. The other topic is Nikola Jokic. Of course, we got to talk about him. And we'll talk about the New York Knicks. But starting off with Aaron Gordon, what makes his career so strange is that he kind of started off as this exciting guy, this incredible dunker. But he also set him up as one of the premier players on his team, even as a relatively young player, and that was the Orlando Magic, where he was a guy who did it all. He was obviously very explosive when with dunking the basketball, and he played good defense, but he also shot a lot more from the outside. And ultimately, it was kind of decided that Aaron Gordon's not a guy who you can have as one of the best players on your team to lead your franchise. And that ultimately led up to his eventual move to a team like Denver, where he doesn't need to be one of the best players on the team. He can kind of go into the background where he provides some good interior defense and some athleticism. And then he even more so converted into that team role philosophy when they won their first title. And then he even went further than that as he started to shoot the ball less and less and less and less from the outside. He kind of became this player who admitted and gave in and said, hey, I'm not one of these premier scorers in the league. I'm not a guy who shoots a high percentage from the outside, so let me just play my role on Denver. And that's kind of going to be the guy who I am. I'm going to be a guy who gets in the dunker spot. I'm going to provide athleticism, toughness. I can defend bigs. I can dunk the basketball. I can get putback dunks. I can play good defense and get out in transition and run. And then we see his career go to another level where he adds back in from nowhere, out of nowhere, he adds back in this shooting ability that he used to show us on the Magic, which we thought he removed from his game for the greater good of playing team basketball, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, he adds it back in the NBA Western Conference Semi-Conference Finals. He adds the three-point shot back into his game, and he has a game four, where he shoots like Kevin Durant, and he puts up 27 points. And now not only is he giving you everything else that he was giving you prior, but he's cemented himself as the third most important guy on this championship team. And what's interesting about it, even furthermore, is that throughout the regular season, it seemed like the guy who was going to move into that third best player on this Denver team, where obviously Jokic is always going to be number one, and obviously Murray's always going to be number two. But throughout the regular season, it seemed like it was Michael Porter Jr. who was moving himself into this three spot on this team where he was routinely putting up 20 points per game. Now, not every night, but every couple of nights he was putting up a 20-point game. And the way he was shooting the basketball, it was like, oh, wow, Michael Porter Jr. has hit another level coming off of the championship. He also bought into this team mindset, but he's also this guy who has the heat check kind of thing about him, and then he also ends up being more consistent than that, where he hasn't just been an occasional heat check guy. He's been a guy who is consistently hitting his shots, and he has a really good shot. So you think, hey, Michael Porter Jr. is cementing himself as this third best player on the team, and then out of nowhere, Aaron Gordon comes back, is the player he's been for the last couple of years, and then adds back in the player he was in Orlando, and he's made this new kind of beast on this Denver Nuggets team where he is the third most impactful player on the team. And then even more so than that, the fourth most impactful player on the team has not been Michael Porter Jr. either. It's been KCP. Caldwell Pope hit three incredibly timely three-point shots in the fourth quarter of that Game 5 victory that they had last night. And KCP, with what he does on both ends, has been the more impactful guy over Michael Porter Jr. Porter Jr. hasn't been that much of a factor. So now you kind of have it where it's Jokic, Murray, Aaron Gordon 3. KCP has been the fourth most impactful guy. He already has 2 championship rings, kind of in that 3 to 5, let's call it 4 to 5, fourth to fifth best player territory on a team, where he's a role guy, and he won the championship in the bubble on the Lakers. He won a second championship as a member of the Nuggets last season, and now he's going for a third one. And they're one game away from going back to the Western Conference Finals. So an incredible career trajectory for Aaron Gordon, also for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Pope was a guy who was in the league for a little while, I believe on Detroit, and then if my memory serves me correctly, he was like this run and gun kind of guy, 3-and-D player, and then he went over to the Lakers when Magic Johnson was running the team, and I remember that press conference because the Lakers were really proud of getting this guy because he was a quiet guy, a culture guy, a guy who was more about his play on the court than he was a loud talker, and he was a guy who was going to run, he was going to defend, and that was really what he was. He was about running and defending. So he seemed like a great fit to bring into a young team like the Lakers. Ultimately, it didn't end up working out for a little while until the Lakers brought in LeBron and Anthony Davis. And then Rondo had an incredible playoffs in the bubble as well. And the Lakers actually, I believe, beat the Nuggets back then. And then what ends up happening? KCP becomes this very reliable 3-and-D guy, more than we ever even thought that he was. He didn't end up being like this top 1 or 2 or 3 player, but he was a 4th, 5th option on a championship team. And then now he's done that again. He's moved himself to the 4th most impactful playoff player this season for Denver. And then we want to get over to Nikola Jokic, where everything that Anthony Edwards did in games 1 and 2, where the Minnesota fans are just basking in the glory of knowing that they have potentially the best player in the league, Jokic just did right back in games 3, 4, and 5. Where Denver fans and the fans at that game in Game 5, they're just going, after an amazing play and an amazing basket where Jokic hits a 3, after he hits a whole bunch of 2s in a row, he steps it out and he hoists that 3-point shot, which he shoots from so far above his head, it's ridiculous, and he swishes it, and everyone's just going, oh! And then Murray makes a play, and everyone goes, oh, and it's just like, you're just basking. The fans are basking in the glory of knowing that they have the best player in the league. And that was exactly the feeling that you were getting in games 1 and 2 from Anthony Edwards. Edwards was the leader of this Minnesota Wolves team where they were Wolves. They were relentless on defense, and it was led by the athleticism and the incredible shot-making and mentality and tenacity of Anthony Edwards. And he was doing incredible things. And then even in the games that they're losing, he's still doing it. But Jokic just fought back. And I don't think that this is a knock on Minnesota. And games 1 and 2 were not a knock on Denver. Denver is an amazing team. They're a championship team. And when they lost games 1 and 2, it was because Minnesota was unbelievable. And then when Denver came back and won the last 3 games, it's not a knock on Minnesota. They're a young team. They won 6 straight playoff games. And we're up 2-0 against the defending champs. And the defending champs fought back in an Herculean effort, in an incredible way. And Jokic reestablished himself and said, no, I'm not relinquishing my title. I am the MVP. I am the most valuable player. And that's not taking anything away from Minnesota. These are 2 incredible teams. Had things shaken out a little bit differently if they weren't in the same conference? You might have seen this game, this series, as the NBA Finals. You might have seen Minnesota against Denver as the NBA Finals. Happens to be they're facing off in the conference semis because they're in the same conference. And that's just the way it worked out, with OKC having a great regular season record. You ended up having it that Denver and Minnesota faced off not in the finals, not in the conference finals, but in the conference semifinals. And both of these teams are unbelievable. And whether the Wolves get eliminated in 6 or whether they push it to a Game 7, the Wolves have done an amazing job. And then you hear the rumblings of everyone talking about, well, Rudy Gobert is not the player that we thought he was. He's not this great defender that we thought he was. And when I'm watching, I'm thinking, no, I think Rudy is this defender that we thought he was. But you shouldn't be surprised when the best offensive player in basketball, Nikola Jokic, is able to score on him regardless. And not only that, all of the blame goes on Rudy Gobert for some reason, when meanwhile there was a sequence in this game, and this just stood out to me because you saw that there was really nothing that anyone, for the most part, could really do, because there was a sequence where Jokic scored on Rudy Gobert. But he did so in the toughest, craziest way possible. He had the ball. He was posting up Rudy. He faked right, faked left, faked back right over the right shoulder, then ultimately went left and threw it up. I'm sorry, he faked right, went left, and tossed it over his right shoulder. From the right side of the backboard, he tossed it over his right shoulder, over the outstretched arms of Gobert, high off the glass, and it went in. And it was an incredible shot. Highest degree of difficulty you could possibly have. And all that you could do as a defender is play clean defense and force your opponent into the toughest degree of difficulty shot possible, and you've done your job as a defender. And if they make that shot, if you force if you force the player you're defending to take a fadeaway 35-foot three-pointer with a hand in his face, you've done your job as a defender. No foul, clean defense. You've done your job. And Rudy did his job on that play. And then what happened on the next play is Karl Anthony Towns was defending Jokic, and Jokic scored on Towns. Then on the next play, Jokic scored on kind of a group effort. Oh no, the next play, Jokic scored on Naz Reid. That was what happened. There was 3 consecutive plays. Jokic scored several baskets in a row. This was in the fourth quarter where the Nuggets finally pulled away because the game was kind of close even in the third quarter, and then Nuggets started pulling away near the end like they so often do. And Jokic scored a really tough shot on Gobert. Then he scored on Towns. Then they brought Naz Reid into the game, and he scored on Naz Reid. And then he scored on Gobert again, where he was literally being double-teamed. And by Gobert and Kyle Anderson, slow-mo. And they fouled him. Anderson fouled him. I believe the foul was on Anderson. And he scored on both of them. How is this entire incredible stretch by Jokic turning into the narrative of Rudy's not a very good defender? He's a fraud. He's playing against the best offensive player in basketball. And on plays where he's not defending Jokic, Jokic is still scoring. Jokic is scoring on everyone no matter what. There's no one in the league who can defend him. And on many plays, Rudy does the best possible job anyone can do, and Jokic scores anyway. Gobert's not a fraud. I've actually been very impressed by Gobert. Even on what he does on offense. He makes some shots and he makes some plays with the ball, and he gets some rebounds and putbacks that you wouldn't even expect he would get. And he does as good of a job on defense as you can try to offer. But Jokic still is the MVP. And when Michael Jordan was the MVP of the league, he was going to do what he did against anyone. And when Larry Bird was winning his finals, he would have done that against anyone. There was nobody in the league who was taking Magic Johnson 100% out of the game. Nobody was stopping LeBron 100% of the time. Nobody could stop Curry from doing what he did during his reign, during his dynasty. And no one can stop Jokic now. All Gobert can do is the best he possibly can. And it's a whole team of guys who can't stop Jokic. So let's not get this twisted. Jokic is Jokic. And then we can transition over to the Knicks, where if you've been a listener of this podcast, if you've been listening to NBAV, we've said many times that the great thing about Indiana, if you're facing off against them, is that they're an inconsistent team. They've been inconsistent the whole year. They've pulled this shtick the whole year. They're good. They're incredible for a game. They'll knock off a team like Dallas. They'll beat Dallas in a couple of regular season games, and then they'll throw up a dud against Charlotte. That's the kind of team that they were the whole season. There's a reason why they barely made the playoffs. It's because they're an inconsistent team, and it's unclear why one night they do so well and why the next night they can't defend anyone. And it's unclear why one night they rebound the heck out of the ball and the next night they don't get any rebounds. And it's unclear why one night Halliburton is the best player on the court and the next night he looks like a bench guy who's only supposed to play 15 minutes. One night, his handprint is firmly over the entire game, and the next night, it's barely a fingerprint smudge on the game. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why everybody talks about the whole season, how it seems like Halliburton's hurt, because nobody can understand why he's so good one game, and then he's vanishing the next night. So everyone's saying, oh, well, he must be injured. He doesn't look injured. Minus a couple of plays in Game 4 where he came down awkwardly. For the rest of the game, for the rest of the series, he hasn't seemed hurt. His shot looks fine. His driving ability looks good. His passing looks great. And in the previous rounds of the playoffs, he looked fine. And in the final 30 games of the regular season, he looked good as well. So I can't make heads or tails out of it. Maybe he just isn't bringing it consistently enough. We saw the same thing this season from the Sacramento Kings. They looked amazing on some nights. They'd blow opponents out. And on other nights, they would lose to mediocre teams. And Fox was bringing it almost every night. But then on random nights, it was just like, why isn't Fox doing his thing? And sometimes players just got to be more consistent if they really want to be known as the best player on their team, one of the best players in the league, best in their conference. They have to be able to bring that. And the fortunate thing, if you're a Knicks fan, is every couple of games, Indiana throws up a stinker. Now, I know that the Knicks also got blown out in Indiana, so it's like, okay, the Knicks got blown out in Indiana, and then the Knicks went home and they blew out Indiana. But the Knicks haven't consistently done that. And the Knicks, if they would have had OG Anunoby, the game wouldn't have gone like that. The Knicks wouldn't have got blown out like that. The Knicks are warding off the sense of defeat in the face of losing all of their players. The Knicks have had to get more and more and more and more out of Jalen Brunson to the point where we don't know how much more they can squeeze out of this guy. The Knicks are now relying on Alec Burks to hit 3-point shots in the fourth quarter. And yeah, there were some massive 3-point corner shots he hit when Indiana was going on a run, and I think they cut it to 12. And Burks in the corner swished it. Can you believe they're relying on Alec Burks right now? A guy who you thought was a throw-in the Bogdanovich trade from the Pistons? So don't come and tell me that the Knicks getting blown out in Game 5 is the same as the Pacers with their entire healthy team getting blown out in Game 6. What excuse do the Pacers have? The Knicks are 25-6 in games that OG Anunoby has played this season. They're not nearly as good of a team without him. He's their best defensive player, and he's one of their most steady offensive players. He can get to the basket, and he can hit threes. He's not the greatest offensive player, but he's a very solid, steady player. He gives them size, he gives them strength, and he's their best defender. He takes the other team's best player. The Knicks have a good enough team to win a lot of ball games without him, but they're a very, very good team with him. Record-wise, their win percentage with OG Anunoby is right at the top with the Boston Celtics. We've said this 100 times. Whereas the Pacers, what excuse do you have to just throw up duds consistently when your team is pretty healthy? Halliburton was there. They had Siakam. They had McConnell. They had Nembhard. They had Turner. Who else do you want? You're going up against a team that's already playing without Randall. They're playing without OG. They're playing without Mitchell Robinson, as if the Knicks aren't getting enough rebounds as it is. And the Knicks are already destroying you on the glass. And their best rebounder is not even there. Their best rim protector is not there. And then Bogdanovich, who's a lethal three-point shooter, who's having a good playoffs, is gone. And now they're relying on Alec Burks, a guy who wasn't even in the rotation. What did he play? 2.5, 3 minutes in all the playoffs until they lost all these guys? And now it's going to come down to games 6 and game 7, potentially. Can the Knicks go on the road and put together one more and take it in 6? Or is this thing going to go back to the Garden and the Knicks are going to rally one last time and try to take all the home games? Either way, the Knicks have put themselves in a good position. This is a series where they could have easily won Game 3 and put this thing on ice. And the Pacers were very fortunate to get that game, and then the tired, worn-down Knicks got blown out in Game 4. But the Knicks, with their resolve, came back and took Game 5 in an incredible effort, specifically from Jalen Brunson. And they didn't even get a big game from Dante. If Dante can summon one more big game, either in Game 6 or in Game 7, the Knicks will be going, in all likelihood, to the Eastern Conference Finals. Boston should handle their series. We'll see if Dallas is able to rebound back from their disappointing loss, 100-96, and we'll see. I think that they can. I think they have a good shot at it, or even if they go down 3-2, they could even it up and send it to 7. So that series is very likely going to go 7 games. As always, we are NBA Avenue. You can follow us on social at NBAv and NBA Avenue on Twitter, and you can email the show at nbavenue@yahoo.com. As always, we are your source for a great time every time, and until next time, we are out.